Your first venture usually comes from passion. You're skilled at something you love, so you start a business around it. But that can only get you so far. You quickly realize that the entrepreneurs who thrive bring more to the table. On top of their core competencies, they know how to manage teams, how to deal with pressure, how to budget, things you may not have considered at the outset. Afton Brazzoni was once in the same boat. When she started Scribe National in 2019, she was fueled by a desire to help B2B companies market their content through writing and storytelling. Her journalism and marketing background served her well, but she needed to learn a lot. With persistence, Afton put together an all-star team and scaled Scribe National to a six-figure company in their first year. In their second year, their revenue doubled, and they're projected to grow even more. In this conversation, Afton shares all the most significant and surprising lessons she learned about operating a small business, things she had to absorb in real time. She goes over the careful balance between scaling and maintaining high-quality work, getting comfortable with inevitable learning curves, and how she stays passionate about storytelling in her new leadership position. I'm Catherine Vasilopoulos, and this is And So She Left, a podcast about incredible women founders and the wisdom they uncovered beyond the corporate world. Afton always wanted to tell stories. When she pivoted out of journalism in 2008 after graduating from journalism school the previous year, PR was a natural fit.
And so that kind of set me on a new path where I was still telling stories, just in a different way. But eventually that translated into marketing, and fast forward, obviously, to Scribe National and where I am today. We help B2B companies, primarily in the technology and leadership space, tell their stories so that they can better connect with their customers.
For Afton, passion has always been at the forefront of what she does. Her journalism skills helped her to excel in the world of PR, and today it's a big part of what sets her apart in the content marketing space. Tell me about the differences that you saw going from, a journalistic background to then being more in marketing and then in PR. How are those all different from one another?
They certainly do have their differences, even though I do think that storytelling is the commonality through them all. It's quite funny because in my experience in the journalism industry, and no offense to any journalists who are listening, but it always seemed to me like journalists viewed the folks in PR and communications as sort of the enemy or someone that was trying to pull one over on them.
Right.
And when I switched into PR, the idea was very much like, journalists are your friends. Let's make their lives easier. And so that was just a funny shift to see going from one side of the industry to another, when really both are so integral to working with one another, and they can really do amazing things when they team up. And so I kind of appreciated more the viewpoint on the PR side of, let's work with journalists. Let's be in a mutually beneficial relationship, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And you're lucky that you got to experience both sides. Some people will never know what it is to do PR or journalism. So you're lucky. And I think that has also shaped this more well-rounded version of yourself.
It very much has. And I think that a lot of the times in the content marketing industry, you'll see people speaking about the importance of bringing that journalistic perspective to content. And that's something that I'm really glad that we can do, because it, again, just lends that really strong storytelling and research angle that sometimes if you don't come in with that journalism background, of course it can be learned, but I think that there's such an advantage there. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it really has been something that's been able to serve both our clients and ourselves really well.
And so you never planned to be an entrepreneur from the get-go. You were
No.
really into the content and the journalistic side of things and communicator. And so what created that shift in you for you to want to go in that direction?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't planned. I don't come from an entrepreneurial family. And prior to starting Scribe National, I was actually working at a 90-year-old institution with a pension plan. And that was kind of my idea of stability and my idea of, what you do. I had moved from journalism to communications to marketing. And at that time, I was working in marketing, but not doing a lot of writing. And so, therefore, not doing a lot of that storytelling that I really wanted to do. And I think that's what sparked it for me. I had always been a freelancer off and on for the 10 years that I worked for other companies. But I was really looking to get back into it and just hone my craft more, and work on that craft more because at my core, I am a writer.
I guess writing for you has always been a calling and a passion then, if that was something that you truly wanted to get back into. So can you tell me why then it's important for you to tell those stories? What's the importance of that in your life?
That's such a great question. I think a lot of creative people really understand this, but it's almost like this drive where you can't not do it. Like I love connecting with other people, learning about them, hearing their stories. I think it's part of the reason why having conversations on podcasts is so interesting and, just kind of exploring that human element, right? And especially now that I work so much with business to business companies, we always say in the industry, like, at the end of the day, it's still human to human. And so I just think there's always been something there about a curiosity about the world. Writing happens to be the medium because that's how I love to communicate. But at the core behind it, I think it's really just that interest in the world and in other people and what they're doing.
I like that, the human element. It's always about that. People like to learn about other humans. And that's how we connect, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's never just about a company's software. It's about, the person who is using that and what their day to day life is actually like, even their hopes and dreams, right? And how something playing a role in their life helps them reach a goal or solve a problem or get closer to where they want to be.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite stories that you've encountered?
Oh my gosh, there have been so many good ones over the years. I used to tell stories for an agricultural college back in Nova Scotia, where I'm from, and just learning about all of the interesting different things they were doing to, create like more environmentally friendly fuel and just some fascinating things. And that goes way back. But an interesting story that we recently told for one of our tech clients was about how one of their customers actually used their software to build an app to assist with the earthquake relief in Turkey. So
Oh.
again, yeah, it's not about software, right? Like this is about people.
Hmm. They're not developed for the sake of the development. They're developed to help people ultimately. It's to help a
Exactly.
process. It's to help an emergency. It's to help in growth or education or development. Based on her humanist view of the world, I could immediately tell that Afton wasn't just passionate about storytelling. She radiates positivity, a quality that served her well during the most challenging moments when she started Scribe National. So tell me about your struggles, and I don't mean to make it sound into like, it was all hard. I'm sure there were great moments too, but we know that as entrepreneurs, when we start, there's some things that just don't go the way we think. Do you recall moments of difficulty or challenge when you first got started with Scribe National?
Absolutely. I think you're so right. It's if it's one thing, it's certainly never boring and it doesn't always go the way you think. That's for
Yeah.
sure. It absolutely is how people will say like the entrepreneurial roller coaster. That's very, very true. I think that, one of the things early on, and I don't know if this ever really goes away, but people refer to this as the feast or famine in entrepreneurship. But it's trying to navigate that balance of getting the right amount of business, but still being able to manage and deliver high quality work.
Right.
And that's something that's always been so important to me is, of course, you want to grow, but you never want to grow at the expense of quality, at the expense of customer service. And I think it can be quite difficult to strike that balance. And one of the biggest things I think that makes a difference in that area is just having the right team to support you. And I've been really lucky that I've been able to find that, but it's not always easy. And it sometimes takes, some false starts. Sometimes folks might not be the right fit, but it's absolutely critical because you can't do it alone.
Yeah. We're not self-made. We are people-made.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't sacrifice quality for the sake of volume, especially in the first couple of years. Can you describe what the first few years looked like for you?
Yeah, it all took off pretty quickly. So I first started the company when I was actually still working full time. This was about 6 months before the pandemic had happened. And within 2 months of starting the company, then I was kind of faced with that decision that I think, we all have to make that choice of when is the right time to just sort of throw away the safety net, so to speak, and dive full time into the business, especially if it is looking like it could really be something. And at that point, it was sort of my own time that was the biggest inhibitor to that. And obviously, things just kind of went wild for everyone in the world shortly after that. So when the pandemic hit, the organization I was working for laid off 3/4 of staff. I was part of that. And so the decision was really made for me at that point that, yes, you are going to go full time into this business. So luckily that worked out quite well. And the business really, again, just kept growing. By that summer, I needed to bring on some help. Going back to my earlier point, like that's what you have to do, but it can be very scary. It's very uncertain. All of a sudden, like it hadn't even been a year since I started the business. And all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, well, now I'm going to bring other people into this venture. It just kind of gets away from you, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a good problem to have, of course, but it kind of gets away from you. You have to make these decisions. You have to sort of take that leap, do things you haven't done before, embrace unknowns and things like that.
You just mentioned something that created a vivid visual for me, which is throwing away the safety net. And in your situation, you're kind of lucky and unlucky, but I mean, mostly lucky that the decision was made for you. But if you hadn't been laid off, how would you have known when to throw away the safety net?
Oh, that is such a great question. And I really don't know because I am a cautious person.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will say, like, starting a business and being in business has actually really changed me. And so I'm definitely far less afraid of risk and things like that than I used to be. But I don't know when you would know. And I honestly don't know how different my journey would look if it hadn't unfolded that way.
I like the risk aversion point that you brought up because until you do it, you don't know. Because when you're a worker, you're basically busy working. You're not busy managing or leading the pack. And so, how do you develop better risk taking skills?
I really think it's just something that you learn through experience. I mean, I never tried to consciously develop it, but I think that as you go along, you realize that, okay, even though this is a new challenge, I haven't dealt with this before, you always learn from it. Always, always. You find a way to overcome it. In an ideal world, you kind of sit down and think through everything that happened leading up to that and how you would handle it. And then, of course, you're presented with a completely new challenge the next time. But I think it's just learning on the job, right? Learning on the job of being an entrepreneur. And then you do become more comfortable with the fact that it's not necessarily a predictable ride, and being in business for yourself is in and of itself a risk. But at the same time, and especially with my experience, and when I started my business, I had people in my life say, like, why are you doing that? Right? That this is the safe thing to do. You should focus on your job.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turned out that wasn't the safe thing. And so I think the whole experience has changed the way I look at risk. And I now believe that if you own your business, that actually is the safest place to be because you're in control.
Right, right. If you work for one employer, all your eggs are in that basket. And when you switch into a more entrepreneurial role, you start to realize that clients will come and go. But if you're good at what you do, things will just keep rolling in. I just feel that there is more control by being a business owner. If one basket fails, you've got 10 others to rely on.
Exactly. And I think that that brings such a sense of self assurance, I suppose, that
Mm-hmm.
I certainly didn't have before. And it just gives you this belief in yourself and this confidence. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
I like also that you mentioned your team and all the people who are helping out and surrounding you, because that is the community of people that we need in order to get things off the ground and help us with the complementary skills that we don't necessarily have. And how did they help you scale up in the first few years?
Well, that's been absolutely critical. So I think there are always two things that I really look for when it comes to team members. And of course, that's a commitment to excellence in the writing, because that's something that's, just inherent to what we do. And it's one of my core values. But then it's also that whole idea of like, be pleasant to work with, be easy to work with.
Yeah.
And so I've been really fortunate that my team members are, but for us, it's really the way that our business works. It enables us to take more volume, take more clients. We can have, multiple writers supporting different clients and working on different projects. And without that, there were just only so many hours in the day that I could spend writing. So the business wasn't going to grow beyond that. With the team, then there's this whole other layer of needing systems and processes and things like that, which for me, I truly don't love the administrative side of the business,
Mm-hmm.
but it's so important to be able to scale, because without systems and processes, you can bring on team members, but then you're reinventing the wheel every single time. And suddenly you're spending all day communicating things that could be documented and don't need to be communicated. And so that was a big learning curve for me, was how to do that well. But once
Mm-hmm.
you have it in place, it definitely unlocks those levels of scale that you just wouldn't have on your own.
Yeah. And from what I understand, you were really successful in scaling up. Do you want to discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, so we were really fortunate to be able to grow into a six-figure company in the first year and then double that revenue again in the second year. But it goes right back to what we were just talking about. Like, without the team, that wouldn't have happened. And I think, of course, just a love for writing, you're going to naturally be more passionate, more engaged, more interested in something when you love what you're doing. And I really think that for us, long form content writing is where we truly shine. And so there's an element there too that I think is worth touching on, is that when I started the business, our scope was much broader. We didn't really have a focus. It was still writing, but the industries we worked with were much broader, and the types of content we created were kind of all over the map. And around the same time this kind of scale was happening in my business, a big part of that was that we did get more focused about what we were doing and what our core offerings were. And so I would just say, for anyone who's kind of newer in their business, I think it's really important to give yourself the room at the beginning to see what you like to do. And I don't think that you need to be worried about niching too quickly. And, everybody talks about niching, but I don't worry about it right away. But I will say that it was definitely one of the things that enabled us to quickly scale, was when we honed in that focus.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the beginning phases are always, let me try everything and be everything to everybody. And then you quickly realize, oh, maybe not. And so you
Yeah.
start to focus in on what you're really good at and what could be highly profitable, or what can have a quicker turnaround, or how you can serve your clients better. What kind of mindset shifts had to happen for you as an owner? Tell me more about
So
that.
many. So many. And I wasn't even prepared for that. I think that when I mean, this may or may not be true for others, but certainly it was for me. When you start the business, it's all about sort of the craft or the skill. And so I knew, like, I was confident in the writing ability, and I had already had 10 years of experience before that. And that wasn't the problem. You realize there's this whole other side to it, which exactly what you said, a lot of it is around that mindset. I remember there were some sales calls that were really hard for me because I just didn't have the confidence, and that just wasn't my area of expertise. And that was a really big learning curve for me. I think that this is kind of a buzzword, but I think scarcity mindset, that whole concept, that was a really big issue for me. Everyone also talks about imposter syndrome. And again, these things, I think sometimes we feel like maybe they're cliches, but they're true for so many. And I think that's why. So a lot of those things I absolutely dealt with. And I wasn't necessarily equipped with the knowledge or understanding to overcome those myself. And so one of the things I did was seek out coaching. You can be the best writer, but if you don't have those other things figured out, that's not necessarily going to come through to your clients. And it's also going to hinder your business, even though the technical skills are there.
We have to constantly be in the mindset of lifelong student, especially if you want to be running your own business, because things evolve, things change, industries come and go and rotate, and there's revolutions and everything and evolutions. So you did the right thing. I applaud you for that, because it's easy to just sit back and say, nope, I know everything, and you don't. Afton's gamble clearly paid off, scaling to 6 figures, doubling revenue, and landing major clients like Wealthsimple isn't easy. But with such different responsibilities than the job she had originally intended to pursue, how does she feel now? How do you feel now being a founder and a leader in what you're doing?
I absolutely love it. Like, I truly...
I knew you would say that.
I truly feel blessed to get to do the work that I do. And my business turns 4 at the end of this month. So maybe in another 4 years, you'll have to check in and see what the answer is. But right now, I can certainly with 100% authenticity say, like, I am loving every minute of this.
Why?
Well, I think it comes back to I get to do what I love doing. And because I am still involved in the writing aspect of my business, and this is something that I think it's important for entrepreneurs to really think about. There's a lot of advice out there, but you have to pick and choose. Because there was a time when I was really following the advice that I needed to completely remove myself from client delivery. And as I moved closer toward that, because I thought it was what I was supposed to do, I started to feel like I was disconnected from the thing that made me want to start the business in the first place. And so it wasn't the right choice for me to move completely away from it. I think one of the reasons why I do still enjoy the business so much is because I am still writing.
Yes, you're getting to do the thing you love, and you get to administer it in the way that you think is the most appropriate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, I think coming back to that storytelling, because I'm involved with many different clients and my writers are involved with many different clients, you're telling such diverse stories, and you're not simply telling, the story of the company that you're working for, which even if you're really invested in that, I just like to have the variety. And so working with multiple clients, I think keeps it really fresh and keeps it really interesting.
Yeah, you have like a broad perspective of what's happening out there, and you're always at the cusp of the technologies and the companies and the people running them. I agree with you. I think that's a wonderful place to be. You'll never be bored.
No.
Let me ask you, who's your biggest supporter right now?
Oh, that's such a great question. Our clients are wonderful. Our team is wonderful. And I feel absolutely supported in all areas of the business in that way. But one thing that I would say throughout my entire journey is that my husband has really been my biggest supporter.
Okay.
Yeah, like we're very different. And that's been so helpful because there have been times where I've been hesitant to invest in myself, where he has really been the one to push me, like, you should do this. You deserve that. It'll be worth it, that kind of a thing. And that has literally had a very big effect on the trajectory of my business. And it would not be the same today without that. So I think that that's been just a huge level of support for me.
Wonderful. And I've heard this often from guests on our show, how they've attributed a large part of their comfort or a soft place to land at the end of the day to their spouse, because that is a constant source of support. And many times they're like, I couldn't have done it without him or her. And it's just it's a wonderful addition to what we have to offer. And it kind of gives us a boost to give back to clients afterwards. But can I go back to one thing you mentioned earlier, and it brings it back to this point? You said something about one of the anxieties or one of the initial mindsets is this concept of like scarcity. And then now you're talking about your husband encouraging you to invest in yourself. This investing in ourselves may be tied in with that, there's like not enough resources, not enough money. Why would I spend the money to go see a coach or whatever it is that I need? Tell me about that. This like investing in yourself. Why is that important?
Oh, yes, this definitely rings true for me. And I think that those two things are absolutely tied, as you mentioned. And so for me, the scarcity mindset was something it just stems from childhood and was just something that had been with me my entire life. And this is why I think it can be so great to be surrounded by people that are different from you, because that is not something that has ever really been an issue for my husband. And so I think being able to have a perspective of someone else coming in and just showing you something in a different light. And then, I began working with a coach about this particular issue as well. It's like a forest that you can't necessarily find your way out of unless someone is kind of lighting the path in front of you, I think sometimes. And oh my gosh, am I ever happy that I did make that investment, because it just comes back to needing people in your corner. And coaching is also one of the things that changed my whole business. Like, it would not be where it is today without that.
What did you learn?
So just those fundamental things that when you're coming in with the creative skill set that you have and knowing that you've got that dialed in, but you're not coming in with all of the other things. So those lessons around, systems, processes, sales, all of those things that are fundamental to a business, but that you might not have. And then the mindset and being in a community with other business owners too, because it can be quite isolating when you're just by yourself as an entrepreneur.
Right. Yes. Finding that community of like-minded people who may not be in the same industry, but still you need that community support. I'm just so impressed, and I just feel like you're such a sharp person, and that's the kind of skill set that you need in order to be a good content developer. It's just this like ability to constantly evolve, to have passion for it, to love the human aspect of what the story is about, and being a good storyteller. And I feel like you have all those elements combined. So it's been really nice talking to you, and I loved meeting you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. It's been an absolute pleasure. And that's very kind of you. And that is absolutely what I try to be. And I think it goes back to what you said about how entrepreneurship is just constant learning, right? And so that's, as long as you're doing that, I think you're doing the right thing.
Thank you so much to Afton Brazzoni. You can learn more about the Scribe National through the link in the episode description. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe to And So She Left wherever you listen. Your feedback helps us to better serve current listeners and reach new ones. You can also fill out our quick feedback form. It's just 5 questions long, and your response helps us to make this show that you want to hear. And So She Left is made by Cansulta and Ethan Lee. We'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. Our music is by Chris Zabriskie, edited for your enjoyment, and you can find a list of all the songs you heard here in the episode notes. I'm Catherine Vasilopoulos, and thanks for listening.